Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, and we are live. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Yes, not if you can hear me. Yep, awesome. All right, another day, another dollar, right, folks? Today, I'm going to try something new. I mentioned it in the last episode. I asked for volunteers to supply an image that they are having difficulty with, whether it's either composition or editing or whatever it is that you're having a hard time overcoming. I figure if we can incorporate, maybe at least one image at the beginning of our sessions, people can help, can learn from, having their images critiqued. You can learn by watching somebody else's image get critiqued, because it's all about learning. It's all about the process. And even though you may not be an active participant in the critique, looking at some of the...
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Oh, there he is.
There we are.
There's the man of the hour.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good.
Doing good. Replay, okay. You can hear me, right, Duck?
Absolutely.
All right, okay. My place is a mess here, but do you see this table way behind here, over here?
Yep.
Do you see this table, Duck? Okay. This is what I learned from you about DIY. I found this must be a coat rack or something in the basement.
Uh-huh.
So I can put this here, and I can pull these things out further.
I know where this is going.
And if I need more space here, I can put cardboard. And it's in the other room, but I have black cloth, and this goes up. This can go up. Mm-hmm. So I have black cloth, and I have white cloth, and I can do photography here. Now, all of my lamps, I have a lamp on this side and a lamp on that side. Both of them are daylight, and I also have other daylight lamps, not lamps, but photography lights that I can put on tripods.
Cool.
And I'm all set.
Yeah, you're definitely going to need to remove some of that clutter in order to have a working access.
Oh yeah. This is. Well, and the reason why I have the clutter here is because I'm moving.
Oh.
So this is only temporary.
Okay.
Yes.
Moving to a new place?
I'm moving to a new place. Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm glad to see that you have joined us, because it would have made today a little awkward considering I have your image that you supplied.
Yes. Do I have a picture in a picture here, right? You did that?
Yes, I did
okay.
that. I did that.
All right.
That way people can, when they watch the playback on YouTube, they can see me, they can see who I'm having the conversation with, and, hopefully it'll make the experience a little bit more personal. So, okay. But I can turn that off at any time in order to get into a conversation. So, without further ado, what I was saying to everybody just before you joined in, Bill, was that, last week I sent out an invite, to people to submit an image for critique, and you were the one that volunteered and stepped forward. So the thing is, you're going to be able to learn something from the experience, and others who watch get to learn through the experience as well. Now, in my particular case, I am a very firm believer in the critique process. I've gone through a lot of the critique process through the online forums. In particular, I'm a member of Photomentorist. A lot of you already know that. Photomentorist.com is a small photography forum where it's a very personal photography forum, because it is a small community. And everybody there knows everybody else, and they're more than willing to reach out and help you if you ask questions, if you ask for the help. The problem with critiquing can be twofold. One, it can be very scary. All right, because you're kind of opening yourself up to allow others to give you some kind of feedback. And that could be very scary because you're opening up something that for many of us, art is a very personal thing. So we're opening up this very personal thing in order to allow others to maybe tear it apart. And it could be a little gut-wrenching, at times. However, if you come to the realization that as bad as some of the language may be, as brutal as some of the honesty may be, if we really take a step back and realize where that critique is coming from, ignore the haters, because you're always going to get haters. But if you really listen to the underlying message of a lot of the critique, and you step back and you look at your image with a little bit more objective lens, you might say, well, they have a point. I can make this a little bit better if I try a little harder. I can make this better if I tweak this. I can make it better if I learn that particular skill and apply it. So hopefully we will get to that level. The other side is for the people who are giving a critique, it's also a learning experience because, and BJ will back me up on this, my involvement with Toastmasters, that's the principal way that we learn within Toastmasters about stepping up in front of an audience and speaking publicly. Whenever we give a speech, we always have evaluators there to evaluate our speech and then give us a critique afterwards. And you learn from these observations that are made from a secondhand source. And we stop and listen to what they have to say, we learn. But also the people that are giving a critique learn because they learn two different things. They learn how to offer a critique so that it is not taken in the wrong way, how to formulate the language so you don't come across condescending or being a know-it-all. And also you learn because now by you analyzing and seeing what is wrong with somebody else's, in Toastmasters with somebody else's speech, or in photography with somebody else's image, it starts registering in your own library of these things to look out for within your own images. So by critiquing somebody else's images, you also learn to avoid certain things within your own images. So hopefully we'll all come to a new level of learning through this process. And like I said, if you guys like this concept, we'll start employing it into future sessions. Maybe do one member's image at the very beginning, and then maybe, for like Lightroom and Photoshop, take something from that critique and expand into it with the lessons. All right, so today is our inaugural test run. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is present Bill's image that he's supplied to me for critique. And let me pull it up. So,
Let me unmute. By the way, Alan was with me when I took this picture. Hi, Alan.
Okay, so Alan may be able to shed a little bit of light as well. Okay, so all right, so what I have here is the PSD file that I asked Bill to send me with his edits. All right, and unfortunately, I don't see your edits here, Bill. I see some stuff that was done, but not the process.
What I probably should have done is I probably should have sent you the CR2 file with the sidecar, and you would have seen what edits I did. I don't use Lightroom. I prefer Photoshop.
Oh, that's fine. What I wanted to see was your actual work process. All right. I wanted to see the individual layers of how you got to a very specific point in your image. And what I see...
Okay, what I did before I got to this, I went into Photoshop, ACR, and what I do is I'm trying to think here. What I do first is, it would be easier if, can I share for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I take control of this?
Let's see. That's a good question. One per only.
I think okay. You have to set this up in your settings.
Yeah.
Do me a favor. Can you open ACR and I will point to how I do things.
All right.
It doesn't have to be that. Just open up ACR.
Well, do you see the share button on the bottom of your?
Yeah, here we are.
Agreed?
Okay, share screen, and let me. I'm going to do it. Let me share the screen. I'm not doing what you've told me to do because, again, I'm moving and I haven't moved things off the desktop. So I am a bad boy, and I was going to do this today because I feared that I was going to have to share. Shortcuts, Adobe Shortcuts, Photoshop.
Okay, well, just while you're getting that, what I'm going to do is I actually went into the Camera Raw filter for this image, and everything was right down the center. I did not see any.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm wondering what file you sent me.
Okay, I sent you the PSD file. But I also sent you the CR2 file initially. I sent you a link to the folder, and the CR2 file was in there. So that's what I sent you initially.
Yeah. So I have this. This is the original. This is the original.
Are you in Adobe
file.
Camera? I'm sharing my screen right now. Are you in Adobe? I'm sorry. Are you in Adobe Camera Raw?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm just in Photoshop.
Let me just open the file as a CR2 file, and the first link I sent you last week, I sent you the link to the folder, and in there is the CR2 file. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I had a busy day. I went for
so
I went hiking
without
here we are, Boston.
Yeah. So without the sidecar.
You don't know what I did.
Yeah.
No, that's. This is what happens when you're not. Here we are. Here's the. Do you want me to send this to you in an email? The sidecar?
No, it's all right. 0439 is the file.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I am opening the file, so.
All right, so that's the image that I received.
Did.
Okay. All right.
Interesting. Oh, I don't know why. I don't know what happened here. It's not, the sidecar isn't opening. That's strange. What I did first I went into.
Well, let me ask you, rather than what you did, what were you looking to do overall with this particular image?
Okay, what I was looking to do overall is I went into lens correction. I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is my regular flow. I went into Adobe Landscape for profile.
Okay.
I keep this as shot because with my camera, in most cases, at shot is good enough. Sometimes I may have to tweak the temperature, but in most cases, it's okay. So I basically did this, punched up the clarity a little bit, maybe punch up. No, I didn't do the dehaze. And I'm not going to save this because I don't know what happened. I don't know why it's not open.
Yeah, no, that's fine. All right.
Unless I gave it a...
What's the subject?
Also what I did, I went into luminance, and the green and the orange are sort of dark. So I lightened the green, I lightened the yellow.
Yep. Okay, I saw that.
I might have done the purple, probably. Yeah, I did the purple, and I did the a little bit of the red, orange, a little bit of the red.
Yeah, and it looks like you.
And then I opened it, and then what I did is I went. Okay, sometimes we lose your voice.
Yeah, looks like you brought down the luminosity in the sky too, because I see some blue in the sky here.
Okay, what I did with that is I opened up another picture, and what I did is I opened up another picture. Yeah, let's open this one. So what I did, I didn't save. I don't like doing things unprepared because this is what happens to me. So I opened it. So I opened another picture. Let's say I opened this picture.
Okay.
I opened this picture, and then how come it's not opening? Come on, guys. And then I picked the color picker, and and I do a shade of blue that I want. I didn't want it too dark because it wouldn't have been natural for that particular shot. So maybe I did something like that. And then what I did is I went into filter. Where the white was, I went into filter. No, I take that back. Select, color range, and then I highlighted the white. Mm-hmm. Let's say I highlighted the white. Okay. And then, just to show you what I did, it's not going to look good here. But what I did is I went to gradient here, and I did the gradient there.
Okay.
There, and of course it changes the color. That's how I got the blue in that sky in the Prudential building.
Okay. Gotcha.
So that was basically my workflow for what I did. I can stop sharing now.
All right.
And it's easier for me to show things than to explain it, because sometimes I don't know the exact terms that I use.
Right. All right. Well, the image that you sent me, all right, definitely the foreground has been lightened up. So a lot of the green foliage has been brightened up. The sky has definitely been colored. It looks like you also did some sharpening on the Prudential building. All right.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yep. And then you combined everything onto its own layer. Mm-hmm. Okay. So overall, not really a lot was done to this image. All right. So what is the focal point for this image?
The focal point I wanted to be the Prue and that's the nickname for it, the Prue.
Yep.
And the foliage in front of it and that bridge. The problem I had that particular day.
All right. So here's a very common problem that you just mentioned. You have a background element and you have a foreground element, and you said that is my subject.
Yes.
You're wanting a background element and a foreground element as your subject.
Yes. Basically, what I'm thinking of, like, where I come from is a photojournalism.
Yeah, even with photojournalism. even with photojournalism, you have to have a very strong singular subject.
Okay.
All right.
What I was trying to show is, like, you could see the Prue in many different areas in Back Bay, Boston. The
Right.
Esplanade is a beautiful place, and I thought, because of the foliage, because of the bridge, this is where I wanted to take the picture. But I also wanted to show the Prue, and this is where I get into trouble sometimes with critiques. Sometimes I look at things that I have experienced,
Yep.
and I show them. And even though it's my experience, it's not somebody else's experience.
Exactly.
So for somebody who's looking at it like you, for somebody who's looking at it for the first time, it doesn't mean anything to you. But because I lived in that neighborhood for 4 years, went to school in that neighborhood for 4 years, rode my bike up and down that little river in 4 years,
Yep.
within the 4 years, and I worked a year and a half on the 44th floor of the Prudential building while
Wow.
in college. So basically, it's like, hey, this was my environment.
Yeah. All right. So you actually brought up some great points there. And the fact that you were at this location taking the image, puts you in a very emotional connection with that image.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is, how do we express that emotional connection when there's a separation? All right. So you as the photographer now have to imbue part of what you experienced into this image in order for that to translate to somebody else. Because what we're doing as the photographer, we are relying on our other senses besides our eyes to complete a bigger picture that's not there. All right. So we remember the sounds of the city. We remember the smells of being, in that park. All right. We remember the weather, if it was warm, if it was chilly. We remember what led up to and followed that experience. All right. So we have all these emotions to draw from and all these senses to draw from that is non-existent to another viewer. All right. So we need to kind of impart some of that feeling into our image so that others can understand it. All right. So the first thing is, what was I concentrating on? What was I looking at that was of interest in this scene that I want others to understand this is the most important part of this scene, and exclude the other things. All right, so this is where we need a strong subject. Everything else is a secondary character, a supporting actor to our subject. All right, so in your statement, you said, well, the Prudential building in the back and the park, the trees and the bridge in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are two different subjects.
Okay.
All right, so we have the building in the background. All right, so if we want that to be our main subject, everybody else is a supporting actor to that subject, including the bridge. All right. However, if we want the bridge, then the building becomes the supporting actor. Right. That doesn't mean that we exclude them from the scene. It's just that they take a secondary role.
Okay.
All right. So for example, if you say, I want the building to be the most relevant part of this image, all right, that doesn't mean somebody who's looking at it is going to totally dismiss that little bridge in the front, because it's there, it's in the scene. All right, it's just not going to compete for the viewer's eye. Okay.
I'm really more, if I had to pick and choose, I'm more interested in the bridge and the foliage because that's what's happening at this point in time. It doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't even always happen that way every fall.
All right.
The prudential building is
All right. Well,
always there.
That's how I shot it. I mean,
Alan shot a similar picture of the crew.
That's fine.
In fact, his was landscape, and he had more of the esplanade than I had.
Okay. Well, no, that's fine. You know, a lot of times we go into a scene, and part of the process is a discovery process. All right. How can I take this scene and make a decent image from it? And what often happens, and I'm guilty of this too, I'll hedge my bet by doing a lot of different things that will allow me to pick and choose later. So that's fine. That is a very legitimate way of creating an image. All right. And fortunately for you, this particular image, there's enough depth of field that allows you to play with either making the building the forefront or making the bridge the forefront of your image, depending on how you post-process it. The problem is you can't have two things, because what happens is the person coming in to view this image doesn't really know where to look. All right, so what happens is they play a guessing game with the photographer. All right, Mr. Photographer, what am I looking at here? What am I supposed to be paying attention to? Where are my clues that tell me where to look? Because most people don't have the photographer right there with them to say, hey, Bill, can you tell me what I'm supposed to be looking at here? All right. They don't have that luxury. All right. So that's why it's important through, just field work with the use of light, composition, and depth of field, we can control where the viewer's eye goes. All right?
I just looked at this, you said depth of field. I shot this at f8 with a focal length of 72 millimeters.
Yeah, so you're going to get a lot in relative sharp focus. Absolutely.
I'm surprised I got that much with f8, or maybe because
it's the lens.
The lens, okay.
Yeah. If you had a telephoto lens, you would have gotten a little bit more differentiation between blur and sharpness. Okay, so now this particular image we're looking at here, this is the after you've done some cropping. All right, because the image you sent me is this one, so we can see a little bit more of the sky and a little bit more of the the top of this particular building.
That's one of the newer buildings,
right?
If you ever watched the TV show Boston Legal, that building was shown a lot.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it's newer than my time in Boston.
Okay. All right, so now if we look at certain rules of how people view an image, and these are not photographic rules. These are just hardwired into our psychology of how we look at things. All right, and I'm sure you've all heard them. We tend to look at things that are lighter first. We tend to look at things that are in sharp focus first. And we tend to look at faces first. All right, so those are pretty much the big three. All right, so the biggest problem with the original shot is we have, it's not an overly high contrast scene, but we do have contrast between the sky and the ground. All right, so we have a very, very bright sky, and we have, a lot of the foreground is in shadow, including the building. All right.
Yeah, just a little background there. That shooting angle going west, the sky was very light. It wasn't completely white, but it was extremely light.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Actually, if I put a curve on this and bring it down, that'll let me know if there's any detail.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So there are really very, very few clouds. And if they were very, very soft. All right. Because I'm not really seeing it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, sensor spots. I think those are sensor spots. Yep, sensor spots. All right. Okay, so but anyhow, so there's enough information within this scene to be able to go a couple of ways. All right. Now with your edit, the way you did it here is you really cut off the top of the building, all right, and now the antenna on the top of the building just goes up and off the top frame of the image, okay? So that leads me to think that the building in this case is a little bit more on the secondary subject side, all right? All right, so that means that the foreground trees and bridge will be the primary, okay? The problem is that we have some competition between the two areas, all right? So if we were to look at this, we see kind of like a V here, all right, where this upper area is very, very bright, all right? And then we have this section here that is very, very bright as well. But if we were to look at the balance of area between the two, this upper part has more, area-wise, has more brightness than the tree line. All right, so because it is off balance, we want to bring our vision, our view up. Okay, so this area up here is competing for our eye. And what's within this area is that building. Now that building, the blue of this building is a little bit darker than the blue of the sky. So we have this sympathetic color profile going on with blues. So we have all this blue up here, okay? All this blue up here that is vying for our attention. All right, so that is problem number one. All right, the second part is this bridge here, which we would like to see put into a little bit more of the forefront, is hidden in a lot of dappled shadow. All right, so we're losing some of that into the texture of our background. Okay, you with me so far? Okay, yes. So what we need to do now is I did two edits. I did one edit where we emphasized the bridge, and I did a second edit which we emphasized the building. All right, and that's the nice thing about, editing after the fact, is that we can take the same image and edit it multiple ways. Now I'm going to show you two ways, but there are many, many more ways, all right, including black and white conversion and the whole 9 yards. All right, so this is the raw file straight out of camera. And I'm going to show you what I did as far as edits. Okay. And what I did here is I wanted more emphasis on the foreground elements. All right. In particular, the bridge and the fall foliage colors in the trees. Okay. So I'm using light and I'm using atmosphere to kind of throw the balance by putting that background, you know, a little bit further back and making that foreground come forward a little bit more because it's a little bit more contrasty in the foreground than it is in the background. Okay, so let me break down the steps that I did to get here. Okay, so let me turn all these layers off and I'll just go over them one by one. All right, so the first thing I did is I said, you know what? There really is no information in the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it and give us something a little bit nicer to look at. So I went into my texture library and I pulled up an image of a sky. And let me just go ahead and turn this off, turn this on. All right, so here's the sky that I had in my collection, okay? And I said, well, what I need to do is I need to create a mask of all this bright area. So I used a luminosity mask, all right? If you remember a couple episodes back, we did some luminosity masks. So what I did is I went into channels, I went in and I used my channels to come up with a clean plate for my sky, all right? I brought it in and I created a mask, all right? So this is the mask that I created from that channel, all right? And then I applied it to the image, all right? So I'm on the cloud layer and I'm masking out everything but the sky, all right? So that allows the buildings to come through, okay? And because I use the luminosity mask, I'm able to get all the detail in the trees and have the sky come through the trees, all right? And along the aerial and the windows and all this detail in the buildings, all right? So this allows me to do a very simple, very quick sky replacement, okay? Now, once I replace the sky, it says, whoa, 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 that foreground now is looking a little bit too dark. Let me balance it out. So I took a curves adjustment, I dropped it below my sky level, all right, and I used it to brighten it up, okay? And what I did is I just opened up my blacks a little bit, all right? Now, I had originally really brightened it up a lot. But what I did is, as I kept adding layers, I would go back to this layer and make my adjustments to it, all right? So this is the great thing about Photoshop, is that as you're building your image, you're able to work non-destructively, all right? As long as you keep in mind that you're going to make non-destructive layers, you can always go back and make your changes, okay? All right, I added another global adjustment, all right? Another curves adjustment that I applied just to the sky, all right? And what did this, what I did with this is I brightened the I brightened the dark areas of the sky and I lowered the very bright areas, all right? So you can see that S-curve here. And I also went into my blue channel and I pumped the blue up in the sky a little bit, all right? Because what I'm wanting to do is match the image that I pulled in from a different source that has a totally different color grade to it. I want to match that to the color grade of this. all right? And because that Prudential building is has a very distinct blue, I wanted to kind of match that blue there, all right? And I think I also did something in the red channel. No, I didn't. Okay, so just in the blue channel. All right, so now we're getting my sky a little bit closer to looking like it fits in with this scene. So now I need to bring a little bit more emphasis to the foreground. So I used another curves adjustment, and what I did is I grabbed another luminosity mask and I got rid of the buildings. All right, so I'm just masking the foreground trees. And this curves adjustment just brightens up that foreground. It opens up a lot of the shadows, all right? And I said, okay, that's looking a little bit better, but now my sky is looking a little funky after making that change. All right, so once I open it up, the luminosity value of my sky shifts in my perception. All right, so now remember, we're looking at the whole, how one section interacts with another section. All right, and I said, okay, we're gonna brighten that sky in order to make it match the brightness of the foreground. All right, and what I did is I just copied that same mask and I inverted it. All right, so that same mask that I used for my foreground, all I did was Control-I to flip it, and I made it into this mask just for the sky. All right, and for those two background buildings. Okay, follow me so far? Okay. Then I said, you know what? I still feel this thing can be a little bit brighter. I want this to be a nice sunny day. All right. I started leaning more towards a warm day just because of the colors in the foreground. All right. I wanted to kind of emphasize a little bit more of the fall foliage. So what I did is I created this funky curve in order to kind of, oh, here it is, open up my shadows, but I did not want to lose too much of the detail in the sky. All right, so I brought my curve up to open up my shadows. All right, I said, oh wow, I'm losing a lot of stuff in the sky. So I just came here to my brights and brought that down. All right. Now, if you notice.
Hey, Doc?
Yes.
Doc?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No? Oh, now, when you're working with curves, I've never worked with curves. I've tried it a few times, and I just go with the sliders. But how do you know on the line where to raise the shadows or lower the shadows?
Oh, okay, sure. Let me do.
And how and why is doing curves better than using the sliders on the main tab of ACR?
Using curves allows you to target very specific things. If you go into ACR, as you're editing with layers, you don't want to keep going back into ACR to do your edits, because then those edits are global edits, and it's just going to throw everything else that you do in layers. It'll throw all those off. All right, so you should only use ACR at the very, very beginning. All right, and what I do is I use ACR to normalize my image. All right, and what I mean by normalize is straighten out any horizons, get my color balance, get my exposure balanced. So a lot of the global stuff is done in ACR.
I use ACR to, a lot of times I click automatic as a baseline.
Yep,
and then I start making changes from there before I then open things up in Photoshop. But the reason why I never did the curves is because I always thought it was more involved than doing the sliders, and I didn't think it bought me any more than using the sliders.
No, not at all. To tell you honestly, curves is probably the most common layer effect. The most common layer that you adjustment that you will be using. There's just so much you can do with a curves adjustment. Let me give you just a quick demonstration on what the curves adjustment does. Okay, so we have a gradient going from black all the way on the left-hand side to white all the way on the right-hand side. And this represents the full spectrum of luminosity that you can have in an image. Okay, you can't get blacker than black, and you cannot get brighter than white. Follow? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we have a grid here, and on the left-hand side represents our black. So if you notice here, we have a gradient along the bottom. It goes from black on the left to white on the right. Okay? We also have a gradient on the left-hand side of this graph that goes from black on the bottom to white at the top. Follow? Mm-hmm. All right, so this point here is our black point. This represents this side of the gradient. All right? And the reason it's in this lower left-hand corner is because you cannot make it blacker than 100% black. So you can't take that point, drag it down to make it darker. It's impossible. Okay? You can, however, drag it up to make the blacks lighter. All right? So this middle line here represents middle gray. All right? So what I've done with this curve is I told Photoshop that anything that is 100% black, I now want you to make it 50% gray. All right? And if we look all the way on the left-hand side of our gradient, this is 50% gray. Okay? And because it's linear, all right, it's actually, a logarithmic linear line here. It's going to take everything to the right of black, all right? So everything to the right of black is our grays, our midtones, our light tones, and our white. Everything to the right of black is going to also get brightened. And it's going to get brightened according to the logarithm scale of this line. All right? So you can see our middle gray was here. Now what used to be 50% gray is now 25% gray.
Okay.
All right? And what was 25% gray is now 12.5% gray. All right? So you see how as we get closer to white, the difference becomes less and less and less and less because of that scale. Okay? Now, once we get here, that represents the right-hand side of our gradient. And this point is up all the way on the upper right. So you cannot go higher and you can't go further right. because you cannot get brighter than white, pure white. You can, however, drop it down. All right. So if I drop it down to the mid-level, it's saying, I want you to take everything that is white and make it 50% gray. And it's going to make everything along that 50% gray. All right. So now, once you understand that, all right, where this particular grid is divided into fours. So we have our shadows and blacks, and then we have to the left of midtone, to the right of midtone, and then we have our lights and brights. Okay? So all we got to do is set a point, and you set a point just by touching anywhere on that line, all right, and dragging it. All right, so we can take a point and we can drag it, all right, and it's going to create an arc because the white point is set, our black point is set. What we're doing is we're shifting our midtone, all right? So here's our midtone. This is 50% gray. If I shift that to here, I'm saying take everything that's 50% gray and make it 25% gray. So you can see how everything here brightened up. All right, so our 50% gray is this point right here, which is about here. All right, so I can take that curve and I can manipulate it. All right, so this particular configuration is what's called a contrast S-curve. All right, so what we're doing is we're taking our shadows and we're making them darker, and we're taking our highlights and making them brighter. Okay, the reverse S-curve would be something like this. All right, and you can see now how our midtones expanded left and right. All right, follow? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I can go into my individual channels. So I can go to red channel, green channel, and blue channel. All right. And that's going to control my red and cyan, my green and magenta, and my blue and yellow. All right. So for example, if I wanted to add blue, I just click on the middle line and drag it anywhere up in the up position, and it's going to add blue. If I take it and drag it down, it's going to add yellow. All right. And it's the same thing with like the red channel. The opposite of red is cyan. So if I go up, it adds red. If I drag it down, it's going to add cyan. All right. So here's there's a lot that you can do with curves adjustments. All right. You can set your black point. You can say, okay, I don't want my blacks being 100% black. I'd rather have them, you know, being a dark gray. All right, so I can make my black point dark gray, and I can make my white point a light gray. All right, so this is a great way of reducing contrast. All right, this is one of the tricks that a lot of people will use for printing. They will drop their black and white points in order to be within the gamut of their particular printer. But that's for a different lesson. All right. But that's just a brief introduction to curves. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. So what basically I've been doing is I've been utilizing curves along with masks to control the overall tonality of the different elements. All right. So by using a mask that targets just my foreground, I'm able to brighten just the foreground. All right. And if I make a mask for the background, I can, darken my background accordingly. Okay. Or brighten it accordingly. All right. All right. So now we're starting to come into play here. All right. Now the next thing I did, I actually did this. I added a sun glare. All right, because I wanted to make it more obvious daytime shot. So what I did is I took I created a new layer, and then with a brush, I created a very large, huge, soft round brush. And I picked a nice warm color from the foliage here, all right, because there's a lot of yellow in the trees. And I just did a single click, just one little dab up in the corner. And it gave me that nice big lens glare. And I changed, all right, so that's what it looked like. And I changed my blend mode from normal to overlay, or no, soft light was it? I think I did. No, it was overlay. All right. So the overlay kind of blends into the underlying layers, and it just tints everything that nice yellow. Okay. Once I did that, I said, oh wow, it's looking a little bit too warm everywhere. All right. What I want to do is I want to give it a little bit more balance. So I used a color gradient. Let's see, for my shadows. Okay. Let me see if I can show this. All right. I'm just gonna. All right. So that's what it looked like. All right. So I used a blue gradient map. So going from a, dark blue, you just pick whatever blue floats your boat. It doesn't have to be anything super dramatic. If you wanted, deeper blue into shadows, you just pick a deeper color blue for your gradient. All right. And what I did is I had my gradient start to give me kind of like the same color blue all the way up to my midpoint. So everything from middle gray to black is going to be the same blue. And what I'm doing is I'm going to tint the underlying layers. All right. So again, using a soft light blend, it tints everything below it to that blue. All right. And because I only wanted it in the shadows, I used another little technique where I used my blend if. All right. So if you double click anywhere on your layer, you're going to come up with this layer style. And right here is your blend if. And what I said is I want to use everything in this layer, which is my gradient layer. I want to take everything in this layer and apply it to my shadows. That means I need to remove from my highlights. All right, so let me move this out of the way. So watch the sky. See how it's got a lot of blue tint in it? If I bring that, what happens is my highlight areas open up, all right? And now what it's doing is it's applying that blue color to just the shadow areas, all right? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up, all right, by pressing the Alt or Option key. You can split it, and this would be like the fuzziness on your color range. There's also, it's also like using a luminosity range in Lightroom. All right. So what I did is I just said, hey, everything from about middle gray all the way to pure white, I want you to hide that part. I just want to apply the blue to the shadow areas. Okay. So you can see that that just adds a little bit of coolness to the shadow areas. All right. And once I did that, I said, well, you know what? I need to put a little bit of warmth back into my highlight areas. So I created another gradient, and I went from red to yellow. And I said, all right, I want to apply this just to my highlights. So I, once again, double click, brings up my layer style, and you can see here that from about middle gray, from middle gray all the way to white, all right, it's saying everything from this point to the black, I don't want that visible. I just want the area in the brightest part of my image visible. So I'm hiding everything from this point to full black, all right? And this point is roughly around middle gray. And then of course I split open the fuzziness or the transition in order to make it a soft transition rather than a hard transition. All right. So blend ifs allows me to target very specific areas of the image. Okay. So now I have an image that is looking a lot warmer, a lot more like it belongs in a midday shot. However, it's looking a little flat. We lost a lot of that definition because we played around so much with the color toning. So I said we need to bring some definition back. We need to give dimension to our scene, in particular the trees, because we lined them up so much in order to bring the attention down. All right, so now before going further, you can see the tonality in this upper area and the tonality in this lower area are a little bit closer to each other. They're not as contrasty as they were before. All right. But like I said, we lost a little bit of that dimension. So I created a dodge and burn layer, and using a soft round brush, I just brushed in black to bring back some of the shadows in the areas that I don't want people's eyes to go to. So this lower section here, along this tree here, all right? So I can do something, just brush, 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 all right? And you can see how that just brings a little bit of black into it, okay? This tree here, I gave it a little bit of dimension. All right, keeping in mind that the direction our sun is here, the direction of light is here, so I'm putting the shadow on the opposite side of where the sun is hitting. Okay, and that's how I'm dodging and burning these trees. Everything that is away from the sun is getting a little bit of shadow. Okay, I add a little bit of shadow to this part of the building in order to make it stand out a little bit more against this part. And I ran just a little bit of shadow on the shadow side of the Prudential building. All right, but I wanted that Prudential building to be lost in some of that atmosphere, some of that midday haze or the summer haze. Okay. Now, it's still a little bit too bright up at the top, so I took a gradient and I applied it to the top. And just to bring everything together, I made one more curves adjustment to give the overall image that that summer brightness feel. Okay, and that are all the steps that I took to take this image from here to here. All right, and you can see it's a pretty dramatic difference. All right, now obviously you don't have to make it that dramatic. Salt to taste, you know, you can do anywhere in between. All right, according to your taste. But hopefully this gives you some insight on how you can now control where the viewer's eye goes to just by controlling the different zones. So in this case, I had two zones. I had zone 1, which is my background, and I had zone 2, which is my foreground. Okay, so I used Photoshop to control those two. Any questions about this one so far?
No.
Anybody else got questions? No?
Interesting, though.
Okay.
No questions, just interesting.
Okay. All right. Like I said earlier, all right, I did this. This was the first attempt at editing this shot that I did in order to bring a little bit more attention to the foreground element of the bridge. Okay. The second one I did was to bring attention to the building. All right. And for that, the first thing I did is I cropped in. And as you can see, in comparison to the original crop, I cropped a lot. All right. There's no bridge to compete there. There's no big bright area of yellow trees to compete with. All right. It really is just about the building. All right. So this is the before and this is the after. All right. All right. And just like previously, the first thing I did, let me turn all these off. Okay. The first thing I did was a color or a sky replacement. Sky replacement. All right. So I used the same thing, the same device, a luminosity mask that I got from the channels. All right. And I had a cloud asset in my texture library. All right. Which, by the way, those of you who are in the North Haven Camera Club, I will be giving a lecture on how to build and maintain a texture library for the January meeting. All right, so hopefully we'll see you there. But anyhow, this is the sky replacement that I did. And then now it's a matter of trying to balance the areas. All right. What I did is I created some masks. All right. So this is my foreground mask, and this is my background mask. So you can see there it's the same mask, just inverted. All right. And the nice thing about that is you just create a single mask and then you can use it for the two different parts of your image. All right. Again, so this is my foreground zone, while this one is my background zone. All right. Or zone 1 and zone 2. Okay. So I brightened up, let's see, what did I do? Yeah, I brightened up the foreground and I darkened up the building in order to make it stand out against that sky. All right. So you can see how here the building is kind of a little muted. All right. So with this curves adjustment, all right, here's my S curve, all right, that we discussed earlier. This is an S curve. This is my contrast curve. All right. I take my blacks and I make them darker. I take my lights and I make them lighter. And I'm creating separation between my shadows and my highlights area. All right. So that will create contrast. All right. Create contrast. All right. Then I did, I said it's still looking a little bit too dark. All right. Kind of gloomy. So I created another curves adjustment layer that originally I just kind of brightened everything up. All right. And in order to preserve all my brightest brights, I took that and nudged them down just a tiny little bit, ever so slightly. The one thing with curves is you don't need to make these large sweeping changes to them. Sometimes just a shift slightly off center is all you need to make a big difference on your image. Okay. And then at this point, I said, you know what? We have relatively sharp focus in the foreground and relatively sharp focus in the building. I want the viewer's attention to go to the building. So what I want to do is I want to take all those foreground elements and make them blurry. So I'm going to use a faked depth of field effect here. So I went back down, I duplicated my base layer, I took my foreground mask and I just isolated, where is it? All right. I just isolated that layer. And then I went filter, blur, Gaussian blur. All right. And I made all that blurry. Okay. So now when you look at it in front of everything else, it has a bit of a blur to it. All right. Now I thought it was a little bit too much. We're getting some crazy artifacting on the edges here. So I just took the opacity and brought it down to about 50%. All right. And that gave me a little bit more of a natural look. All right. So we have some artificial softening of the foreground as if I were to take it with a more shallow depth of field. So now, instead of the eye competing with the foreground and background, our eye wants to go to the sharpest part of the image. And in this case, the sharpest part is the building. Now, if I wanted to, I can go to my sky and do the same thing. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and give it just an ever so slight a blur effect to the sky. Okay. So now we're getting a little bit closer to our finished look. Okay. The last thing I needed was just something that brought everything together. Again, I kind of wanted to warm it up. It feels like this should be a nice warm day. So instead of using curves adjustment like I did last time, I went with something from the video world, which is a lookup table. So Bill, you're probably familiar with lookup tables, right? And what I did is when you select the lookup table, there are a bunch that come preloaded with Photoshop. And of course, you can always download additional lookups, right? And I went with the crisp, warm look. Crisp, warm look, right? And, oh, what'd I do? What'd I do? Why is it obliterating everything? Crisp, warm, all right. Something broke here. What the heck? Something broke here. That shouldn't be going to black. Let me get rid of. Hold on. Let me get rid of that one. See what's going on here. All right. So, color lookup. Crisp, warm. There we go. That's what it's supposed to look like. So you can see that's pretty horrendous. Okay. Just because it's way too saturated with the colors. All right. So in order to control that, I just go to my opacity and I brought the opacity down to roughly about 25%. You know, again, this is, you know, salt to taste, maybe 30%, depending on how much you want it. And that is pretty much what I did for this particular image. All right, so you can see it really wasn't a lot of layers, okay? And that's the before and that's the after, all right? So now the building definitely stands forward, okay? All right, any questions with that? All right,
No.
So same subject, same exact image, two different ways of editing it. And of course, you give this to other people, they're going to find their own ways of editing it, and you're just going to get, you know, all kinds of ways, all right? But hopefully this gives you some ideas. Questions?
No, thanks a lot, Doug. I got a few ideas to redo some of mine then.
Yeah, we took a trip to Boston. Sue Fenton and I took a trip up, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. We had excellent weather.
Yeah, Boston is great.
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've been there. So, all right. Okay, well, that's it for that part of the presentation. Hopefully, it gives you some ideas. I mean, overall, it's a good picture. There's a lot that you can do with it, you know. But I'm a big believer that, you know, you do need to take it from the camera and develop it in Photoshop in order to really bring out the best that you can from the image. All right. So, you know, taking, you know, this image and presenting it, you know, even if you just run it through Adobe Camera Raw and you brighten it up and balance it out, you know, it's a good picture, but it can definitely go to that next level, right? And that next level, for a lot of people, eludes them. And so what I like to tell people is, what do you want to showcase? Where do you want people to look? All right? What is the most important part of this particular image? Okay? Is it the building? Is it the foreground? Is it the person making googly eyes at, you know, at the camera? Is it the dog running across the field? What is the one thing that, you know, you want people to see? All right. And if you can make it so that subject tells the story, that's even better. All right. Now, obviously, a lot of, you listen to a lot of photographers. It's all about the story in the image, the story. What are you trying to tell with your photograph? All right. And a lot of people will say, well, it's a landscape. I'm not telling a story. There's no story. It's a landscape. It's a building. It's a tree. It's a mountain. It's a lake. There's still a story there. All right. The subject can be the story. All right. And in this case, it's the story of the building on this beautiful day. All right. That you were there. You experienced. You know the sounds. You know the smells. You felt the weather. All right. We want to feel some of that too. Okay. Now, obviously, I had to guess at what the weather was like because I wasn't there. Okay. So hopefully, with your edit being influenced by your experience, you can imbue some of that into the image. All right. So that's your task, Bill. All right. Go back to this image and see what you can pull up from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All righty.
All right. Any questions, Bonnie, BJ? Oh, Trevor joined us. Sorry, Trevor, I didn't see you sneak in. Yeah, Trevor knows a little bit about editing to get the max out of your images. He does some portrait work, and he and I worked on a couple of his portrait images to really, bring the most from them. And Trevor can attest that, you can definitely take it out of camera and make a good picture go wow. So, all right. It's 5 minutes to 8. We got plenty of time. If anybody wants to do any questions about anything else, it doesn't have to be related to Bill's picture or editing. It could be whatever is on your mind that's bothering you.
Yeah, what's bothering me has nothing to do with photography.
Oh. Yeah, I guess I should have.
You see, you have to.
Yeah.
I always tell people with me that, you have to watch your language, because if I know the person very well, I will twist it to a completely different meaning.
Yeah, I do that with my wife all the time.
Which is...
It's fun.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't like outright gross jokes.
Yeah.
It has to be a double entendre. So if somebody says, Bill, you got a dirty mind. No, I don't. You're the one with the dirty mind. Yeah. That's not what I said.
I have a buddy, his favorite saying was, I don't have a dirty mind. No, well, my mind's not in the gutter. They just happen to build a gutter around my mind.
So Doug.
Yes.
This is BJ.
Yep.
The other day, you clued me into the fact that Canon had done some software changes and we can have the EOS webcam.
Yes.
Since all of these are photography people, I wonder if you could spend a couple minutes at least explaining, I don't know who's a Canon person or a other.
Hi.
Yeah, Bill's.
Hi, BJ.
Okay. Well, because I took your advice and downloaded it and connected and found it offers a big extension of capability when we spend our time in situations just like this. And maybe you've gone over this in other sessions, but I thought maybe just take a few minutes and tell people what capability you got from that.
Yeah, so right now I'm working with a Logitech webcam. It sits nicely above my screen. It's small. It's got a very wide field of view. And it allows me to turn my background, my green screen, transparent, and all that good stuff. However, because of the very wide field of view, one of the things that I found is that if I actually point it towards my real studio, which is actually over there, it's not here. If I point it towards my studio, that field of view, as soon as I start stepping away from the camera, everything gets so small looking that it's hard to see what it is I'm doing. And the reason I mention that is because what I'd like to be able to do is bring live studio workshops to this platform, where I actually go in and I set up a subject, set up the lights, set up the camera, do a complete shoot and feed it into Zoom so that you can see the process. All right. And we can interact, and I can take, suggestions from you guys. Hey, what would happen if you did this, you did this. However, with my current camera, the Logitech webcam, I can't. So I said, I wish there was a way I can take my, in my head, I was thinking my old 40D camera that I no longer use. It's sitting in a cabinet collecting dust. I said, I wish there was a way of using that as a webcam, because then I can take a longer lens, put it on there, aim it towards my set, and not be lost in this, 90-degree field of view. So I looked around and it was almost impossible. That camera was not designed for that kind of work. But you got to realize that camera is 15 years old now.
2005. I had a 40D. Yeah. 2005.
The technology for internet communication that we have nowadays was not a thing back then. All right. So since then, they've come with a third-party utilities. Sparkle Cam is one of them. But the problem with those, or a cam link where it takes the HDMI output, and turns it into a video feed. The problem with that is it picks up that overlay that goes on the screen that sees, your shutter speed, your aperture, your battery life. All that is superimposed on that output. Who wants to look at video with all that garbage on the surface? So it just kind of got relegated to sitting in a closet and gathering dust. Flash forward, Sony started coming out with clean HDMI output. So you can take any Sony camera, plug it in directly into your computer, and use it as a webcam. And a lot of people were going, man, I wish Canon would do this. All right. And it took a while, but they finally started listening, and they did it to their more current cameras, like the 5D Mark IV, the 70D. All right. They started implementing this webcam utility. And they said, it'll take a while, but we promise we're going to get to some of these older cameras. Okay? And I'm like, oh, this sounds promising. And finally, about a month and a half ago, they released the latest version, which takes my older cameras, my 7D, my 6D, I believe my 40D is on that list now. I'm not 100% sure. But at least my 7D and my 6D are on that list. So I downloaded the utility, and sure enough, plug and play. I didn't have to do any kind of firmware update. I just needed the software on my on my computer, and as soon as I plugged in my camera, it recognized it and converted it into a webcam. So now I can take my DSLR, put in, you know, whatever lens I want, and use it as a webcam. Now, you're still limited to the physical aspects of that piece of equipment. So for example, my 6D and my 7D do not have autofocus in video mode. So no amount of software is going to alter that fact. All right. So I can't, you know, once I have a set focus, I have to kind of be within that range. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. All right. But I now have access to the higher end equipment to use as a webcam. All right. So if you got Canon gear, check it out. Canon Webcam. It'll bring you up to their website. Let me see if anybody's interested. I can probably look it up.
Yeah, my 60D has video capability.
My 70D, I was able to download that software, install it, and Zoom immediately saw it as one of the cameras available.
Yes.
Of course, test camera was pointing at the back of my head, so it's not something I could use yet, but I found the installation to be very quick and easy.
Yep. Oh yeah, very, very easy. All right, and as soon as it's just do Canon Webcam in the search, and it's literally the first results, EOS Webcam Utility. And if you scroll down, it's going to give you a list. Oh, here it is. Here's a list of all the EOS digital cameras. All right. And if you have any of the PowerShot cameras, they also have a list of that. You can see it's not very great. But for the EOS, all right, here's the 6D Mark II. All right. Yeah, the 4D's not on here. That's the one I'm waiting for. Bring new life to an old camera. But at least my 6D, my 7D is on there. Willing to bet what?
I'm willing to bet they won't do it for 40D because 40D doesn't have video capability to begin with, whereas the 60D does.
Actually, the 40D does have, but it's a hack.
Okay.
If you wanted video with the 40D, Magic Lantern has a hack for it. But
okay, I got it anyways.
Yeah, but anyhow, it's all right here. Just EOS Webcam Utility. So.
Thanks, that it's worth sharing there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now, of course, you got to realize that a DSLR is not the same as a webcam. A webcam has, the ability for lower light video. It also has a much deeper field of focus because of, obviously, the sensor size is so much smaller and the angle of view is so much greater. All right, so you are limited to certain things within the DSLR as a webcam, but the nice thing is, all right, like for example, if everybody looks at VJ's feed, all right, he's showing the back of his room. There's very, very little bokeh in that background, all right? With a DSLR, you can have a wide open aperture that will throw that background into a nice soft blur. You put a 27 millimeter or 50 millimeter lens on a DSLR wide open, and oh my God, you can be in Bill's room with the mess behind him, and that'll just be a blur.
So, 2 weeks from now, hopefully the mess is gone.
I hate moving. Yeah.
Just two things I have to mention about using a Canon camera to a DSLR to do video. According to one book I have, you're better off using a prime lens than a zoom lens, because it will do video better. And I've noticed that because I've taken pictures of animals, of cats and dogs, and I've used a 24 millimeter prime lens.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, Scott Kelby says, if you're going to use video, use a smartphone instead, because, and this is a big problem with the DSLR, it will not autofocus.
Right.
But your cell phone camera will. So that's why Scott Kelby in one of his books said to use a cell phone camera.
Yeah. Well, you got to hand it to, companies like Apple with their latest cameras. They're friggin' phenomenal. And the software driving the cameras now, it's just mind-boggling what can be done. So yeah, absolutely. And you got to realize what the end results are for your videos. YouTube is 1080p. So it's not like you're shooting high grade, high quality video for YouTube. All right. It's not cinema quality. So absolutely.
Well, I have in the settings on my iPhone, I have the settings for 1080p because obviously I'm not going to upload 4K.
Right. And the compression on the latest software, it's M297 or whatever. I don't have it by heart, but that latest video compression algorithm they're using is so much better than its predecessor, the MP4. MP4 is still used a lot, in serving video to the internet. A lot of stuff that you watch on YouTube is MP4, Vimeo MP4. Okay, but the new one, and again, I'm going by memory. It's like M297 or whatever the compression algorithm is. It's just makes the file size a little bit smaller. And it was designed to work on a mobile device. Mobile devices don't have a lot of memory, so they needed software that was compatible. All right, and then this new software is starting to really replace the old form factor. So,
I gave a speech to a bunch of just before COVID hit, and I was teaching them how to use their cell phone or how to use their what do you call it, the iPad, or a tablet and I said portrait mode, meaning holding your camera up like this as opposed to that. And you know what a kid said? He was thinking of the iPhone 11 portrait mode that will see the subject, meaning me, or in your case, seeing you, and everything else will be a complete blur.
Yeah. No. But it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm starting to notice, all right, that this form factor here is starting to creep in all over the place on social media.
That's
Facebook.
That's because Snapchat Snapchat wants you to use portrait
Yes.
mode, and the thing is,
So does Facebook. Facebook
but
is
if
leaning.
you're sending station,
Yeah,
really?
Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, Instagram too.
The problem I have with the hiking group, with they still insist. These guys are a little older. They still insist on landscape mode.
Yes.
They still want landscape.
Yeah.
But and I've told Charlie that everybody is using their phone. Most people are using their phone, and how I know that is having a web page. I look at the what do you call it? You look at how people are using their how people are getting to your web phone. They're all to your web page. They're all doing it by the cell phone.
Yes.
And if you do landscape mode for a picture, it's okay on the screen, on the computer screen, but if you're on the cell phone, it looks like this horrible picture.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Meetup doesn't have it like with iPhone, where you could turn the picture this way and the picture turn. I've told these people, if you take a picture in landscape, if you take a picture in portrait, it will fill it on the Meetup page.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's not going to. But these are people who think like 1960s. So.
I think iPhone came out with a campaign, shot in vertical, I think is the campaign, and they took filmmaker and everything is shot in this orientation. And let me tell you, it's impressive what you can do with a particular orientation once you set your mind to it.
Yeah.
But right now we have old technology that is horizontal, all right, that was taken from older technology, so if we look at the progression, all right, the first TVs were almost square. Actually, no, I take that back. The first TVs were almost circular.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
They were almost circular. Now, if you think about the way a camera sees, all right, or a lens, I should say, a lens is a circular piece of glass. It is going to project a circular image to whatever you're projecting to. Okay. What happened is the industry, as it moved forward, said, all right, well, we have paper that is square. All right. So they were trying to fit this circle into a square. And then they say, this doesn't make sense. Why don't we fit the square into the circle? And that's where we started getting square images. All right. Now we fast forward to video. The cameras were sending out a circular signal. All right. And it was being cropped in, but the technology was still pretty much almost a circle. As the technology advanced, it went more towards kind of like this slightly elongated square. All right. But film theaters were filming in different aspect ratios of panorama because the panoramas were impressive up on the big screen.
Yeah.
Panavision. All right. If you look back as early as, the 1920s and 1930s, I mean, The Wizard of Oz was shot in panoramic mode. Okay. And what they were doing is they were taking just a slice of that circular projection. All right. So now we have technology progressing both in video and cinema. And wasn't too long ago before those two got married and we started seeing widescreen TVs. All right. How many of you can, everybody here can probably remember the day we went from regular, 4x3 TV to widescreen TVs. Nowadays.
Same thing happened with my toaster when we all changed over. All of a sudden, my bread came out of the toaster, this way.
Yeah. Technology, drives. It's a weird combination. The technology drives how we interact, and then how we interact determines how the technology goes. All right. So here it is. Everybody's been watching movies in these wide screens. And of course, once it comes from the theater to the home via first VHS, then DVD, now direct streaming, we're still taking that landscape format and bringing it into the home. So we need the technology in our home to match the technology from the theaters. All right. Now with YouTube being so popular and Facebook being so popular with these devices, how long before our home screens go from this to this?
I don't think so. I really don't think so, because you can't show as much.
Yeah.
You cannot show. You know what my critique for a lot of pictures are when I have to judge? I will tell people, like, let's say you have a beach scene, and I'll say, well, you really have too much sand and too much sky. Make it 16 by 9 because your computer's 16 by 9 and your TV is 16 by 9. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't see it. I don't see. But I said you would never see driverless cars. So
yeah, and I'm sure there were people that saying that we're forever going to be watching square TVs.
Watching what?
Square TVs.
Watching square. Oh, yeah.
Technology changes, folks. There's nothing that we can do to stop that one. Need drives that. And, right now, we're the old fogies. We're stuck in our ways. I remember when, but the new...
Never happened in my lifetime.
But, all the young kids, I see them all the time. They're like this, they're taking pictures like this. All right. And I just want to walk up to them and go, oh, do it this way.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing? But yeah, so you'd be surprised. We'll probably end up seeing, maybe we'll see like really large square TVs, and it's just going to crop according to which direction the video goes. You never know. So, but anyhow, any other questions? That was actually a good topic to discuss. So, any other questions, concerns?
Everybody, a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to go mirrorless. Well, at this point in my life, I've invested so much in lenses, and I haven't spent as much money as other photographers. I've spent money, but I just don't feel like pulling in order to have mirrorless.
I've got both mirrorless and DSLR, both full frame Sonys. But by the time you put the lens on the lightweight mirrorless, it's a heavy camera.
Well, yeah, it's not necessarily so much for the weight factor, although some mirrorless cameras do offer it.
Here again with Sony had the translucent, the semi-translucent mirror anyway, so it was just going straight to the full-frame sensor for the most part, with 20% going up to viewfinder. So as far as the Sony full-frame mirrorless, it's a little bit more contrastier than the DSLR, but more features than the DSLR.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but I think the future is in mirrorless.
Oh yeah,
You
it's
know,
going that way.
yeah.
but you know, there again is past technology influencing current technology. Now, if we think about it, all right, we had film cameras that were SLRs, single lens reflex cameras. All right.
Yeah.
When they decided to go digital, there was no need for that mirror. They didn't need a mirror for digital cameras. All right. They put in the mirror because that's what the people who are using cameras were requiring from a camera. They wanted something that was familiar, and to them, the epitome of a professional camera was a DSLR. You know, the Nikon F1s, the Canon AE1. All right, those were all mirrored cameras. All right, so if they put out a mirrorless digital camera back then, they wouldn't have made a single sale, because all the mirrorless cameras were point and shoots. They were rinky dinks.
Yes.
You know, who in their right mind as a professional photographer is going to downgrade their photographic equipment from a DSLR to a point and shoot? Didn't make any sense.
It didn't make any sense, right?
But, you know, if you really break it down, they did not need to make a digital SLR. They could have started from the ground up, redesigned a whole new level of camera, gotten rid of the mirror right from the get-go, and imagine where we'd be now.
You know, that's almost like the analogy. I read a book about Warner Brother cartoons or the history of cartoons or whatever. And when they came up with the Roadrunner, the first time they showed it to executives, one executive says, "He doesn't say anything." Well, it's one of Warner Brothers, became one of Warner Brothers' well-known and big income for Roadrunner.
Oh, yeah.
And just look at the licensing they made for the Plymouth. It's just that alone.
You know, yeah. You just, you know, marketing has a big influence on technology, and, you know, they're going to go in the direction that they think that's going to make them the most profit. All right. And if the most profit is because people think that a pro camera should have a mirror, that's the way they went. Now, in retrospect, you know, we realize we never needed that stupid mirror from the beginning. You know, so go figure. But yeah, I think DSLR in you know, for the most part, is a dead horse. It's going to be phased out. That's my gut feeling. There are people arguing that, you know, it's not going to go by the way of the dinosaur, simply because there are certain benefits to a mirrored camera, which I can argue for. In the case of like very extreme weather, they're finding that in extreme cold situations, a mirrored camera performs better than a mirrorless camera. Go figure. Go figure. But who knows what you know, technological improvements on the mirrorless camera will, you know, fix that issue. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I, like you, Bill, I have so much invested in my DSLRs that it's not worth it for me. I'd have to win the lotto.
If I were 40 years old, maybe, but I'm 70, and how many more years will I be able to take
At least 20 more, damn it.
pictures?
At least 20 more.
Who knows? It's even if it's 20, I could get by with my if my cameras break, maybe I'll buy a mirrorless.
You might be able to take pictures for 20, but you won't be able to get around for after 20.
Yeah, right. Well, somebody's going to have to wheel me around.
Yeah.
Hey, can we have a photography club that people wheel around? Hey, we need volunteers for our camera club, so we need to be wheeled around. We did have somebody in Mid-Connecticut named Bill, and he used to get around in a chair, and he used to take some fantastic pictures.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder where he is now.
Yeah.
Upskirts of the nurses.
Thank you very much, Doc, for an excellent presentation this evening. And
Thank you, Doc.
All right. Always my pleasure. So, again, if you found what we did today benefit, maybe we'll do it again. Okay? So, anyhow.
Okay. Hey, Doc,
Yep.
Doc, just one thing. Sometimes your presentation freezes.
Yeah, that's...
Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's going from OBS to Zoom and over the internet. So, yeah, we get those hiccups every so often.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are ways of overcoming that, but everything that I looked into, I wouldn't be able to have this one-to-one conversations with you. It would be a one-way,
okay.
And what appealed to me the most about doing this was being able to see your faces, hear your voices, and interact with you as if we are in the same room, Doing it the other way, I would have to split my attention between performing to a camera and then reading a chat screen as you're typing away your question.
Oh, that's tough to do, because the 2 times I did Zoom presentations, somebody else had to look at the chat.
Absolutely, yes.
I can't do both.
And I'm a one person operation here, so
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for me to find somebody to monitor a chat room. Just no. I like this setup. Yeah, is it inconvenient when it hangs up every so often? Yeah, but you know what? I think the benefits outweigh the bad aspects. So.
Thanks, Doc.
And of course, there's always watching it on YouTube afterwards.
Okay. Thanks, Doc.
All right, guys. Always a pleasure.
Nice night. Okay.
Next week, we're not doing anything, but the week after, we're back to a new month. It'll be Lightroom, so stick around. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.